38 biker gang messes with the wrong woman. A Navy SEAL. The sun hung low over the vast expanse of the Arizona desert, casting a golden hue across the rugged landscape. Red Canyon sprawled beneath the sky, its namesake cliffs ablaze with the fiery glow of the setting sun. The towering red rock formations stood like silent guardians, their surfaces etched by time and weather. Sagebrush and cacti dotted the arid ground, and a lone road wound its way through the heart of the canyon, leading travelers into the small town nestled within. At first glance, Red Canyon appeared to be a picture of serenity, a quaint town where everyone knew each other, and life moved at an unhurried pace. Wooden storefronts lined the main street, and a whitewashed church steeple pierced the sky, its bell echoing softly in the distance. Children played on the dusty sidewalks, their laughter mingling with the distant hum of engines. But beneath the peaceful facade, subtle signs hinted at something amiss. Several buildings bore boarded-up windows and faded, "For sale," signs that flapped wearily in the warm breeze. Whispered conversations ceased abruptly when strangers approached, and the townsfolk cast furtive glances over their shoulders. Rumors circulated about people who had vanished without a trace, their disappearances discussed in hushed tone. Heavy trucks with darkened windows rumbled through town at odd hours, their drivers avoiding eye contact, leaving a trail of unease in their wake. As twilight painted the sky with shades of pink and purple, an old, dust-covered car made its way down the solitary road, leading into Red Canyon. Behind the wheel sat Eva Lawson, her gaze steady as she surveyed the landscape ahead. The car's engine murmured a weary song, matching the weariness in her eyes. She navigated the final bend, and the town unfurled before her like a forgotten postcard. Eva pulled into a vacant spot outside Reed's auto garage, the vehicle's tires crunching over gravel. She stepped out, stretching briefly to ease the stiffness from the long drive. Tall and athletic, Eva moved with a fluid grace that belied the tension coiled within her. Her dark hair was pulled back into a practical ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face marked by determination. A leather jacket clung to her frame despite the heat, the sleeves rolled up to reveal toned arms. As she reached back into the car for her bag, a faint scar on her wrist caught the fading light, a subtle reminder of battles fought and losses endured. The garage was a relic from another era, its faded sign creaking softly. Tools hung meticulously along the walls, and the scent of motor oil lingered in the air. Samuel Reed emerged from beneath a lifted truck, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes met Eva's, a hint of curiosity sparking in his gaze. "Evening," he greeted, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone accustomed to the desert's harshness. "Hi," Eva replied, offering a brief smile. "Car's been giving me trouble. Thought I'd see if you could take a look." Samuel nodded, gesturing her inside. "Let's have a look then." As Samuel began his inspection, the sound of approaching motorcycles broke the quiet. Eva glanced toward the road, watching as a group of riders roared into view. Their leather jackets bore the emblem of a crimson vulture, wings spread wide over a blood-red sun. They pulled up outside the garage, engines idling like growling beasts. At their head was Anton Grekov, a tall man with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek. His eyes were cold, calculating as they swept over the garage and settled on Samuel. "Evening, old man," Anton drawled, dismounting his bike. His men followed suit, fanning out casually but with an undercurrent of menace. Samuel straightened, a guarded expression crossing his face. "What can I do for you, Anton? You know why we're here," Anton replied smoothly. "It's the first of the month. Time to settle your account." "I told you before," Samuel said firmly. "I'm not paying for protection I don't need." Anton chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "That's unfortunate. Accidents happen to those who don't appreciate our service." Eva watched the exchange silently, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. The tension was palpable, and the other townsfolk nearby hurried away, avoiding any involvement. One of Anton's men stepped forward, knocking over a toolbox. Wrenches and sockets clattered loudly across the concrete floor. "Oops," he sneered. "See what I mean about accidents?" Samuel's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. "Leave now," he demanded. Anton shook his head slowly. "I'm afraid we can't do that until this matter is resolved." Before the situation could escalate further, Eva stepped forward. Is there a problem here? She asked calmly. Anton turned his gaze to her, eyebrows raised. And who might you be? He inquired, a hint of amusement in his voice. Just a traveler passing through, Eva replied, her tone steady. But it seems to me you're causing unnecessary trouble. This doesn't concern you, Anton said, dismissively. Best you keep walking. Actually, Eva said, taking a deliberate step closer. I have a problem with bullies. Anton's eyes hardened. Careful, lady. You don't know who you're dealing with. Eva offered a thin smile. Neither do you. One of the bikers lunged toward her, aiming to intimidate. In a fluid motion, Eva sidestepped, grasping his outstretched arm and twisting it behind his back. The biker yelped in pain as she guided him face first into the side of a parked car. Another move to strike her, but Eva anticipated the attack. She delivered a swift kick to his knee, sending him sprawling to the ground. A third hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. Anton watched with a mixture of surprise and anger. Get her, he barked. Two more men rushed forward. Eva met them head-on, her movements precise and efficient. She blocked a punch, countered with an elbow to the ribs, and swept the legs out from under the other assailant. The confrontation lasted mere moments. The fallen bikers groaned, scrambling away from her. Anton glared at Eva, his fists clenched. You'll regret this, he snarled. No one crosses the crimson vultures and gets away with it. I'll take my chances, Eva replied coolly. He pointed a finger at her, his voice low and threatening. You just made a powerful enemy. With a sharp gesture, Anton signaled his men to retreat. They mounted their bikes, engines revving angrily before they sped away into the encroaching darkness. Silence settled over the garage once more. Samuel released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank you, he said quietly. But you shouldn't have done that. They'll be back, and they'll bring more trouble. Eva shrugged lightly. Bullies like that thrive on fear. Standing up to them is the first step. Samuel Reed leaned against a workbench, wiping his hands with an oil-stained rag. His calm demeanor belied the tension that still lingered in his stiff shoulders and the furrow of his brow. He studied Eva for a moment, his eyes sharp and thoughtful, before letting out a low chuckle. Well, he said, tossing the rag aside, I can't say I've ever had someone step in and clean house for me like that. Guess I should thank you. Eva shrugged, leaning against her car. They didn't give me much of a choice. Samuel nodded, his gaze drifting toward the open garage door. Beyond it, the town stretched out under the harsh desert sun, its quiet streets hiding an undercurrent of unease. That was Anton Grukov and his goons. They call themselves the Crimson Vultures. Real charming bunch, as you've probably noticed. I've dealt with worse, Eva replied, her tone measured. Samuel raised an eyebrow at that, but didn't press. Instead, he sighed, crossing his arms as he looked back at her. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you've also painted a target on your back. The Crimson Vultures aren't the type to let something like this slide. I've noted, Eva said simply. What's their deal? Samuel hesitated for a moment, then gestured for her to follow him deeper into the garage. He led her to a small office in the back, cluttered with old tools and yellowing maps pinned to the wall. He pulled out a chair for her, and took a seat himself, leaning back as he gathered his thoughts. They run this town, more or less, he began. Started with protection rackets, shaking down small businesses like mine. Then they got greedy, started working with bigger players, smuggling drugs and other things. His voice tightened at the last part, and he looked away briefly before continuing. But it's not just them. There's something bigger behind all this. They're just the muscle for someone else. Eva listened intently, her expression unreadable. Who? That's the part one can't pin down, Samuel admitted. But I know they're using the old tunnel system. Back during Prohibition, this town was a hub for bootlegging. Tunnels everywhere, under buildings, through the hill. Most folks think they've been sealed up or forgotten. But I've seen the signs. Heavy trucks at odd hours, people disappearing without a trace. He paused, his gaze fixed on a spot on the desk as if lost in thought. I've lived here long enough to know when something's wrong. And this town, it's been wrong for a long time. Eva tilted her head, studying him. Why stay, then? Why not pack up and leave? Samuel let out a humorless laugh. Thought about it, but this is home. And after what I've seen, after the lives I couldn't save, he trailed off, his voice faltering. Then he straightened, a flicker of determination in his eyes. Someone's got to stand their ground, even if it's just an old mechanic like me. Eva regarded him for a moment, her sharp gaze softening slightly. You said you've seen lives you couldn't save. What did you... Samuel hesitated, then finally said, I used to be in the Air Force. Rescue. Spent most of my time pulling people out of hellholes. Sometimes we got there too late. Sometimes the people we saved didn't make it anyway. You carry that with you, no matter how much time passed. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. I'm guessing you know a thing or two about that. Eva didn't respond immediately, her hand brushing the scar on her wrist. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. Yeah, The two sat in silence for a moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Then Samuel straightened, clearing his throat. Anyway, I don't know what brought you to this dusty little corner of nowhere, but if you're planning on sticking around, watch your step. The Crimson Vultures don't take kindly to outsiders, especially ones who fight back. Eva gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Good thing I don't scare easily. Samuel chuckled again, shaking his head. Yeah, I figured that much. Just be careful. This town's got a way of pulling you into its mess, whether you want it or not. Eva stood, glancing toward the maps on the wall. Mess or not, I've got a feeling I'll be sticking around for a while. Will Eva's bold stand against the Crimson Vultures spark hope for Red Canyon? Or has she just painted a target on her back? What would you do if you were in her place, facing a gang this ruthless? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your take on Eva's next move. If you're rooting for Eva to take down the Vultures, don't forget to hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe for more action-packed updates. Things are about to heat up in Red Canyon, and trust us, the next confrontation will leave you breathless. The town of Red Canyon seemed to hold its breath as the sun dipped below the horizon, the soft pinks and oranges of the desert sky giving way to the deep purples of night. Eva Lawson crouched in the shadows near an abandoned building, her sharp eyes scanning the faint glow of activity in the distance. A group of men, their silhouettes illuminated by dim floodlights, moved with purpose around a large warehouse on the edge of town. Eva had been tailing their movements for hours, careful to stay hidden. The Crimson Vultures weren't amateurs, they had lookouts, stationed at key intersections and patrols circling the area. But they didn't have her training. Staying in the shadows, moving silently, blending into the terrain, these were skills she had mastered during years of covert operations. From her vantage point, she observed the operation unfolding. Trucks rumbled down the dirt road toward the warehouse, their engines muffled as if they were trying to avoid attracting attention. A group of men worked quickly to unload crates, their movements efficient but tense. Eva adjusted her position, moving closer to the warehouse without making a sound, her eyes narrowing as she picked out more details. A tunnel entrance. She spotted it near the base of the warehouse, partially obscured by stacks of crates. Men moved in and out of the opening, carrying heavy boxes marked with cryptic symbols. Eva's stomach tightened. Samuel's warnings about the old Prohibition-era tunnels were proving true. These weren't just remnants of the past, they were an active network, one the Crimson Vultures were using to run their operation. She crept closer, the night air cool against her skin. Her boots made no noise against the packed dirt, as she slipped behind an abandoned vehicle for cover. From here she had a clear view of the tunnel entrance. The men were working quickly, their hushed voices carrying just enough for her to catch snippets of their conversation. Move it faster. They want this batch ready by sunrise, one of them barked, his tone sharp and impatient. Eva's jaw tightened. Batch. The word made her skin crawl. She'd heard it before, in missions that had taken her to the darkest corners of the world. It wasn't just drugs they were moving, it was people. As she watched, a door on the far side of the warehouse opened, and two more men emerged, dragging a group of people behind them. The victims shuffled forward in silence, their heads bowed and their hands bound. A young woman stumbled, and one of the men yanked her forward roughly, barking at her to keep moving. Eva's hands curled into fists as she forced herself to stay put. Charging in now would accomplish nothing but get her killed. She needed more information, routes, schedules, key players. But the sight of the captives being herded like cattle into a waiting shipping container burned into her memory, fueling her resolve. The container was pushed onto a small flatbed truck, which reversed carefully into the tunnel's entrance. The sound of its engine faded as it disappeared into the earth, swallowed by the darkness. Eva's gaze shifted back to the men near the warehouse. Their activity was slowing, some of them lighting cigarettes and leaning against the crates, as though the hardest part of their night was over. But then another truck arrived, this one larger and more heavily guarded. A man stepped out of the cab, his presence commanding immediate attention from the workers. He was tall and lean, his sharp features illuminated in the harsh light. Eva recognized him instantly. Anton Grick. He barked orders in a mix of English and Russian, gesturing toward the crates and the men standing idly. They snapped to attention, unloading the truck with renewed urgency. Anton walked toward the tunnel entrance, pausing to exchange a few words with one of the guards. Eva strained to catch what he was saying, but his voice was too low. Whatever it was, it had the guard nodding briskly and disappearing into the tunnel. The activity continued for another hour, and Eva remained motionless, her body taut with tension but her mind laser-focused. By the time the trucks finally left and the floodlights dimmed, she had a clear picture of the operation, or at least enough of it to know that the crimson vultures were just the surface of something far more dangerous. The warehouse was silent now, the hum of activity replaced by the faint creak of metal settling in the cool desert night. Eva moved quickly through the dimly lit space, her flashlight sweeping over crates stacked high along the wall. Most were unmarked, their contents a mystery, but her instincts told her there was something here, something important. Near the back of the warehouse, she found a rusted filing cabinet, half hidden behind a stack of discarded pallets. The drawers were locked, but a quick jab with her knife broke the flimsy latch. Inside, she found a trove of documents, manifests, ledgers and scattered notes written in hurried scrawls. One file, thicker than the rest, caught her attention. She flipped it open, her breath catching as she scanned the pages. There it was, a name she hadn't heard in years but could never forget. Victor Kane. His name appeared repeatedly, alongside orders, payment records and correspondence linking him directly to the Red Canyon operation. Diagrams of the tunnel system were annotated with his initials, and there were references to shipments of high-value assets routed through the town. Her hand tightened around the file, the paper crumpling slightly under her grip. Suddenly the room seemed smaller, the air heavy. The memories came rushing back, unbidden and unforgiving. It had been a quiet night in Guatemala, the kind of oppressive silence that warned of trouble. Eva's SEAL team had been deep in cartel territory, tasked with gathering intelligence on a smuggling route. Victor Kane's name had come up then too, a shadowy figure, whose ruthless efficiency made him both feared and respected in the criminal underworld. The ambush had been swift and brutal. Victor had orchestrated it with surgical precision, turning the jungle into a death trap. Eva could still hear the screams of her teammates, the deafening roar of gunfire, the explosion that lit up the night like a second sun. She had been thrown clear by the blast, her body battered and bloodied, but alive. Victor had emerged from the shadows, his cold, calculating eyes scanning the carnage with detached satisfaction. He had delivered the final blows to her fallen teammates, one by one, ensuring none survived. Eva had watched, helpless, her body pinned beneath the wreckage of their vehicle. His face had burned itself into her memory, a predator reveling in the devastation he had wrought. She had survived, barely, but the guilt of that night had followed her like a specter. She had vowed to honor her team's sacrifice by dismantling the operations they had died trying to expose. And now, years later, here he was again. Victor Kane, the man who had taken everything from her, was pulling the strings in Red Canyon. Eva blinked, her grip on the file tightening as she forced herself back to the present. Her heart pounded, but her mind was sharp. This wasn't Guatemala. She wasn't the same soldier who had been caught off guard all those years ago. This time she was ready. She closed the file, tucking it into her jacket. The connection was clear now. Victor Kane wasn't just involved in Red Canyon. He was running the and if he thought she'd let him continue unchecked, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. As she stepped out into the night, the warehouse fading behind her, Eva's jaw set with determination. This wasn't just about the town anymore. It was personal, and Victor Kane would. The night had settled into a heavy silence by the time Eva returned to Reed's auto garage. The faint glow of a single work lamp illuminated the garage, casting long shadows over the tools and parts scattered across the floor. Samuel was hunched over an engine block, his hands deftly tightening bolts as though the rhythmic task could ease the tension lingering in his mind. He looked up as the garage door creaked open. Eva stepped inside, her expression grim, her movements deliberate. Without a word, she grabbed a nearby stool and sat across from him, the weight of her findings evident in the hard set of her jaw. "What did you find?" Samuel asked, wiping his hands on a rag. His tone was calm, but the flicker of concern in his eyes betrayed his unease. Eva exhaled, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "They're not just a gang. This goes deeper than extortion and intimidation." Her voice was low, edged with anger. "They're trafficking people, Samuel, using the old tunnel system to move them like cargo." Samuel froze, the rag in his hand falling to the floor. "Trafficking," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. The word hung in the air, heavy and damning. "I followed a convoy to one of the warehouses," Eva said, her tone gray. "I saw them, victims, men and women being led into the tunnels like cattle. The Crimson Vultures were there, armed to the teeth, overseeing the operation. I found files too, detailed records of transactions, names, and routes. This isn't just a local racket. It's part of something much bigger, something international." Samuel shook his head, leaning back against the workbench. "I knew things were bad, but this is beyond anything I imagined. They've turned this town into a gateway for something monstrous." Eva nodded, her eyes sharp and focused. "And they're not just smuggling people. Those tunnels, they're their lifeline. They've turned the old system into a network for trafficking drugs and God knows what else." Samuel rubbed a hand over his face, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. Eva straightened, her resolve firm. "We start digging. I need to map out the entire tunnel system, every access point, every route they're using, and I need to know who's running this operation." Victor Kane's name came up in one of their files. "He's a heavy hitter, someone with the resources to pull this off. If he's involved, we're going to need more than just evidence. We'll need to cut the head off the snake." Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded. I still have some old blueprints of the tunnel system from when my dad worked for the mining company. They're not perfect, but they'll give us a starting point." "Good," Eva said, her tone clipped. "I'll also need eyes on the ground. Someone who can move around without drawing attention." Samuel hesitated, then said, "You'll want to talk to Clara Vega. She's one of the few decent cops left in this town. If anyone's willing to stick their neck out, it's her." Eva raised an eyebrow. "And she hasn't been bought off by the cartel." Samuel shook his head. "Not Clara. She's too stubborn for that. But she's been playing it safe, trying not to make waves. You'll need to convince her." "I will," Eva said simply. "But if she's in, she needs to know what she's risking. These people don't just scare, they kill." Samuel gave a grim smile. "Clara knows. She's lost people too." Eva stood, pacing for a moment before turning back to him. "We'll need to move quickly. They're ramping up activity. I overheard them talking about moving the package soon. Whatever that means, it's big." Samuel nodded again. "I'll get the maps ready. And if you need a hand with anything else, you know where to find me." "Thanks, Samuel," Eva said, her voice softening slightly. "This town doesn't deserve what's happening to it." Samuel watched as she headed for the door, the determination in her stride unmistakable. "Neither do you," he called after her. She paused, glancing back with a faint wry smile. "Maybe not, but someone has to stop them." The next morning, Eva stood at the edge of Red Canyon's modest police station, blending into the shadows of a nearby alley. She had been Sheriff Dalton for days, piecing together the threads of his ties to the Crimson Vultures. But today wasn't about the sheriff. Today was about finding an ally, if one still existed in this town. Her target stepped out of the station a few minutes later. Clara Vega. She was younger than Eva expected, likely in her late 20s, with a sharp, focused expression that stood in stark contrast to the weary faces of her colleagues. Clara's uniform was neatly pressed, her badge polished to a gleam. There was something in the way she moved, purposeful, yet cautious, that told Eva this officer hadn't given up the fight just yet. Eva followed her from a distance, as Clara made her way down the street, stopping occasionally to greet townsfolk. The conversations were brief, but Eva noticed the way people seemed to relax in her presence, as though her mere existence offered a sliver of reassurance in a town shrouded by fear. When Clara ducked into a small cafe, Eva made her move. She slipped inside, taking a seat at the counter near Clara,
and ordered a coffee. For a few moments she said nothing, letting the quiet hum of the cafe settle between them. Then, without turning her head, she spoke. "You're not like the others," Eva said, her voice low but steady. Clara stiffened slightly, her hand pausing mid-reach for her cup. She turned her head just enough to glance at Eva, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Who's asking?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be surrounded by people who've lost their way," Eva replied, meeting her gaze. "Someone who can tell you haven't." Clara studied her for a long moment, then set her cup down. "You're not from around here." "No," Eva admitted, "but I know what's happening here. The Crimson Vultures, the tunnels, the missing people." Clara's jaw tightened. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You don't know what you're talking about. And even if you did, saying it out loud isn't a great idea. People are being trafficked," Eva pressed. "Drugs too. But that's not all. They're moving human lives through this town like cargo. And your sheriff? He's part of..." Clara looked away, her hands clenched into fists. "You think? I don't know that. You think I don't see what's happening?" Her voice trembled with restrained anger.
But what am I supposed to do? The sheriff controls half the force. The Crimson Vultures have everyone else in their pocket. The moment I step out of line, I'm as good as dead. Eva leaned closer, her tone softening. "You don't have to fight them alone." Clara's eyes flicked back to her, searching for something. Certainty, perhaps. Or conviction. "And who are you exactly?" "Some vigilante looking for a cause. I'm someone who's been where you are," Eva said quietly. "I've seen what happens when people like them aren't stopped. And I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing. But if you're ready to fight back, I'm ready to help." Clara hesitated, her eyes scanning Eva's face for any hint of deception. Finally, she sighed, leaning back in her seat. "You really think you can take them down?" "I don't think," Eva replied. "I know, but I need information. The kind only you can get." Clara glanced around the cafe, ensuring no one was paying attention, then lowered her voice further. "The Argento Syndicate, that's who's pulling the strings. The Crimson Vultures are just their errand boys. Sheriff Dalton is on their payroll, along with most of the town council. They've been using the tunnels for years to move their operations through here. But lately, things have escalated." "How?" Eva asked. "More people going missing, more shipments coming through, and there's talk, whispers about someone high up in the syndicate coming here soon. I don't know who, but Dalton's been on edge, tightening security around the warehouses." Eva nodded, the pieces falling into place. "You've been gathering this on your own." "As much as I can," Clara admitted. "But every time I get close to something concrete, it disappears. Files, witnesses, everything. They've got eyes everywhere." "Then we need to blind them," Eva said firmly. "And we start by making sure they don't see us coming." Clara stared at her for a moment, then gave a small, reluctant nod. "If we're doing this, we do it right. No half measures. We can't afford to mess up." "We won't," Eva assured her. "But once we start, there's no turning back." Clara smirked faintly, a spark of determination lighting her eyes. "I wasn't planning on turning back anyway." As they left the cafe together, Eva felt the first stirrings of hope. Clara Vega wasn't just a potential ally, she was a kindred spirit, someone who understood the stakes and was willing to risk everything to do what was right. Together they might just have a chance to bring the darkness in Red Canyon to light. Clara Vega sat in her patrol car, her fingers gripping the steering wheel as she stared out into the empty streets of Red Canyon. The weight of her double life was beginning to wear on her. By day she wore the uniform of a deputy, pretending to follow Sheriff Dalton's orders. By night, she worked in the shadows with Eva, gathering intel and quietly undermining the Crimson Vulture's operations. But now, the sheriff's questions were becoming more pointed, his tone sharp. That morning, Dalton had cornered her in the station, his eyes narrowing as he leaned over her desk. "You've been asking a lot of questions lately, Vega, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Care to explain?" Clara had forced a calm smile, feigning indifference. "Just doing my job, Sheriff. Last I checked, investigating was part of the job description." He didn't look convinced. "Be careful," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "This town has a way of chewing up people who don't know when to keep quiet." Now, sitting alone in her car, Clara felt the sting of his words. She knew the risks of what she was doing, but every time she thought about backing down, She remembered the faces of the missing, the people the syndicate had taken, and she thought of Eva, a woman willing to risk everything to stand up for those who could. Her radio crackled, pulling her from her thoughts. "Vega, you good?" Eva's voice came through, steady and calm. "Yeah," Clara replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "Just thinking about Dalton," Eva asked knowingly. Clara hesitated, then sighed. "He's starting to catch on. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up without tipping him off." "You don't have to do this alone," Eva reminded her. "If it gets too dangerous, I'm not backing down," Clara interrupted, her voice firm now. "These people, what they're doing, it has to stop. If I don't fight, who?" Eva didn't respond right away, but Clara could hear the faint note of respect in her silence. "You're stronger than you think, Clara," Eva finally said. "We'll figure this out, together." Meanwhile, Samuel Reed was in his garage, methodically cleaning a rifle he hadn't touched in years. Eva sat nearby, her arms crossed as she watched him work. The quiet hum of the overhead light filled the space, punctuated only by the soft scrape of metal against metal. "Didn't think I'd see you pull that out," Eva said, nodding toward the weapon. Samuel chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Didn't think I'd have a reason to." He paused, his hands stilling as he stared at the rifle. "You know I've been where you are, fighting battles you can't walk away from, trying to make sense of the ones you lost." Eva's expression softened, but she said nothing, letting him continue. "Air Force Pararescue," Samuel said, his voice quieter now. "Spent my career pulling people out of hellholes, hoping to bring them home, but I didn't always get there in time. Lost more people than I care to count, and the ones I did save," he shook his head, "not all of them made it." He looked at Eva, his eyes tired but resolute. "I know what it's like to carry that weight, but I also know that giving up doesn't make it lighter. You keep going because it's the only way to honor the ones you couldn't save." Eva nodded, her jaw tightening as she absorbed his word. "That's why I'm here," she said quietly. "For my team, for the people they were trying to save." Samuel gave a small, grim smile. "Then don't let them down. This town needs someone like you, Eva. Someone who doesn't scare easy. Someone who knows how to fight." For the first time in days, Eva allowed herself a faint smile. "Thanks, Samuel. I'll try to live up to that." "You already are," he said simply, turning back to his rifle. "Now let's make sure we're ready for whatever's coming next." The two of them sat in silence. After that, the unspoken bond of shared loss and determination settling between them. It wasn't much, but in a town as broken as Red Canyon, it was enough. The warm scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon greeted Eva as she stepped into Sarah Alvarez's diner, a modest yet welcoming establishment nestled at the heart of Red Canyon. The diner's faded sign swung gently in the desert breeze, and its mismatched furniture hinted at years of resilience in a town overshadowed by fear. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the streets outside, safe, familiar, and filled with the quiet hum of life. Sarah Alvarez moved with practiced ease behind the counter, pouring coffee and exchanging kind words with her patrons. She was a woman in her late 50s, with streaks of silver in her dark hair, and a warm smile that hid the weight of her past. As Eva approached, Sarah glanced up, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly as if assessing whether Eva was friend or foe. "You're not from around here," Sarah said, setting down the coffee pot and wiping her hands on her apron. Her tone wasn't unfriendly, but it carried a cautious edge. "Just passing through," Eva replied, taking a seat at the counter. "But I've heard a lot about this place. People say it's the heart of the town." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her expression softening slightly. "Well, I don't know about that, but we try to look out for each other best we can." It didn't take long for Sarah's guarded demeanor to fade, as Eva steered the conversation toward the town's struggles. When Eva mentioned the Crimson Vultures, Sarah's face darkened, and the warmth in her voice was replaced by steely resolve. "They took my niece," Sarah said quietly, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Marisol. She was just 19. One day she was here, helping me close up, and the next, gone." People whispered about her running off, but I knew better. "I know what they do to young women in this town." Eva nodded, her expression grave. "I'm sorry, that's why I'm here. To stop them." Sarah studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "You'll need help." As if on cue, the bell above the diner's door jingled, and a young man entered. He was in his early 30s with a lean frame
and the faint remnants of grease stains on his hands. Miguel Alvarez carried an air of quiet determination. His eyes, however, betrayed a history of regrets too heavy for someone his age. Miguel, Sarah called, beckoning him over. This is Eva. She's here to help with the situation. Miguel's gaze flicked to Eva, his expression guarded. You think you can stop them? He asked, his voice low. I think we have to try, Eva replied. I hear you might have some insights into how they operate. Miguel hesitated, glancing at Sarah before speaking. I used to work for them. Not by choice, he admitted. They needed someone who could keep their systems running. Tunnels, surveillance, transportation. I didn't have much of a choice back then. But you left, Eva said. Miguel nodded. I couldn't do it anymore. Not after I saw what they were doing, people they were hurting. I got out, but I still know the layout of the tunnels, their schedules and their weak points. Sarah placed a hand on Miguel's shoulder, her voice firm but encouraging. We've both lost people to that. If there's a chance to fight back, to stop this from happening to anyone else, we're in. Eva leaned forward, her voice steady. This won't be easy. They'll come after anyone who stands against them. Miguel met her gaze, his expression resolute. Let them come. I'm tired of running. The three of them sat together for hours, poring over Miguel's memories of the tunnels and Sarah's knowledge of the town's dynamics. As they worked, a sense of unity began to form. Three people from different walks of life, bound together by a shared determination to bring justice to Red Canyon. By the time Eva left the diner that evening, she knew she'd found more than just allies. She'd found people with the courage to face the darkness, no matter the cost. The plan had seemed airtight. Using Miguel's detailed knowledge of the tunnel system, Eva had plotted a route designed to get them into one of the Crimson Vulture's key strongholds undetected. The goal was to intercept a shipment, gather evidence, and identify the deeper connections to Victor Kane. Every detail had been scrutinized: entry points, patrol patterns, escape routes. But in warfare, no plan survives contact with the enemy. The team moved through the tunnels in near silence, their flashlights dimmed to avoid detection. Eva led the way, her senses razor sharp, her years of training kicking in with every step. Behind her, Clara followed, her sidearm drawn, while Samuel brought up the rear with Miguel. The air was damp and stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of rust and decay. The tunnel walls loomed close, the darkness pressing in on them like a living thing. This doesn't feel right, Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. She scanned the shadows ahead, her grip tightening on her weapon. Eva paused, her jaw tightening. She felt it too, that subtle shift in the air, the prickling sensation at the back of her neck.
Something was wrong. She raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. Miguel, she murmured, are you sure this is the right route? Miguel nodded, though his brow furrowed with unease. It should be. This was the least guarded passage when I worked for them. Eva's gut told her otherwise. The tunnel ahead seemed too quiet, too still. Before she could voice her concern, a metallic clink echoed through the air. Her eyes widened. Trap. The explosion came before she could finish the warning. A flash of blinding light and a deafening roar tore through the tunnel, throwing the team off their feet. Dust and debris rained down, filling the air with choking grit. Eva hit the ground hard, her ears ringing, her vision swimming as she scrambled to her knees. Clara, Miguel, Samuel, she called out, her voice hoarse. I'm here, Samuel shouted, coughing as he helped Clara to her feet. Blood streaked her temple, and she winced as she clutched her side. Clara's hurt. I'm fine, Clara insisted, though her voice was strained. She tried to steady herself but nearly collapsed, her breathing labored. Eva moved to her side, assessing the injury, a jagged piece of shrapnel embedded in her ribs. It wasn't fatal, but it was bad. Miguel, Eva called again, panic creeping into her voice. There was no answer. Samuel's flashlight cut through the dust, landing on a figure being dragged away by two armed men. There, he shouted. Eva's heart sank as she saw Miguel struggling against his captors, his shouts muffled as one of them pressed a gun to his head. She raised her weapon, but the men disappeared around a bend, their retreat covered by the sudden burst of gunfire from a side passage. It's a kill zone, Samuel barked, dragging Clara behind a crumbled section of the wall for cover. Bullets ricocheted off the stone, the deafening sound echoing through the tunnel. Eva gritted her teeth, returning fire as she retreated towards Samuel and Clara. Every instinct screamed at her to pursue Miguel, but the tactical reality was clear. They were outnumbered and pinned down. Clara's injury left them vulnerable, and the Crimson Vultures had the advantage. "We have to fall back," Samuel yelled, firing a few more rounds before pulling Clara to her feet. Eva hesitated, torn between the lives of her team and the promise she'd made to Miguel. She knew what would happen if the Vultures took him: interrogation, torture, or worse. But staying meant risking everyone's lives. The decision felt like a blade slicing through her resolve. "Go," she barked, covering their retreat as they stumbled back the way they came. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she laid down suppressing fire, buying them precious seconds to escape the ambush. The team emerged from the tunnels minutes later, their breaths ragged, their bodies battered. Samuel helped Clara into the back of the waiting truck, his face grim as he applied pressure to her wound. Eva slammed the truck door shut, climbing into the passenger seat and gripping the dashboard tightly as they sped away. The ride back to the garage was heavy with silence, broken only by Clara's pained gasps, and the distant rumble of the Crimson Vulture's trucks echoing through the night. Eva's mind raced, replaying every step of the mission, every choice she had made. The ambush had been too precise, too calculated. They had been fed false intel. Anton Grakov had known they were coming. Hours later, back at the garage, the atmosphere was somber. Clara lay on a makeshift cot, her wound bandaged but her face pale. Samuel sat nearby, his hands trembling slightly as he cleaned his rifle. Eva paced the room, the weight of failure pressing down on her like a physical force. "We shouldn't have gone in blind," Samuel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice wasn't accusatory, just weary. "They knew we were coming. Someone tipped them off, or they were watching Miguel." Eva nodded, her jaw clenched. "It's my fault. I should have called it off when I felt something was wrong." "You did what you thought was right," Samuel replied. "But now we regroup. We figure out how to get Miguel back." Clara stirred, her voice faint but determined. "We're not leaving him with them. He's one of us." Eva stopped pacing, her gaze hardening. "No, we're not. But this time, we do it smarter. No more mistake." As the team huddled together, their shared resolve reignited. Eva felt the sting of their loss transform into something sharper, more focused. The Crimson Vultures had taken Miguel, but they hadn't broken them. If anything, they had only strengthened their determination to fight back. The stakes were higher now. The battle wasn't just for Red Canyon, it was for their team, for Miguel, and for everyone who had suffered under the Vulture's reign. Eva wouldn't let this failure define them. Instead, it would fuel the fire for the fight to come. The garage was quiet except for the soft hum of the overhead lights, and the occasional clink of tools as Samuel prepared their gear. The failure of their last mission weighed heavily on everyone, but there was no time to dwell on. The Crimson Vultures had Miguel, and Eva knew their window to act was closing. Samuel stood over a workbench, meticulously assembling a set of tactical gear. His movements were precise, almost meditative, but the tight line of his jaw betrayed the storm brewing beneath. His calm exterior. Eva leaned against the doorway, watching him for a moment before speaking. "We need a new plan," she said, her voice firm but edged with exhaustion. Samuel glanced up, his eyes sharp. "We will. But this time, we're not walking into another ambush. They underestimated us once. They won't make that mistake again." He gestured for Eva to join him at the table, where he had laid out a map of the tunnel system Miguel had provided. Sarah stood nearby, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of worry and determination. "I've been thinking," Samuel continued, tapping a section of the map. "The tunnels are their strength, but they're also their weakness. They use them for everything: transport, storage, communication. If we hit the right points, we can cripple their operation." Eva studied the map, her brow furrowing. "What about Miguel? If we go after their infrastructure, they'll double down on keeping him secure or worse." "That's why we're going to hit them hard and fast," Samuel replied. "Divide their attention, make them think we're targeting their supply routes while we extract Miguel. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "I can help. I know this town, its people. If we can rally some of the locals, maybe we can create distractions. Give you the time you need." Eva raised an eyebrow. "The locals won't stand a chance against the Vultures." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not talking about sending them into the tunnel, but small acts, blocking roads,
spreading misinformation, can create enough chaos to give you an edge. Eva nodded, appreciating the thoughtfulness of the suggestion. We'll need all the help we can get. Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, Clara struggled to sit up on the cot. Her face was pale, her breaths shallow, but her eyes burned with determination. I'm not sitting this one out, she said, her voice hoarse but resolute. Clara, Eva began, her tone soft but firm. You're injured. You need to rest. Clara shook her head, wincing as the motion pulled at her bandages. They have Miguel because of me. I won't let them keep him. Samuel stepped in, his voice calm but commanding. You won't do anyone any good if you push yourself too hard and collapse out there. Clara smirked faintly. Good thing I'm not going out there then. I've got another plan. She gestured toward her phone, which sat on the table nearby. There are still a few officers in this town who haven't sold their souls to Dalton. They're scared, but if I can get to them, I think I can convince them to help. We need boots on the ground. Eva hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She admired Clara's resolve, but knew the risks of involving others. You're sure you can trust them? Clara nodded. I wouldn't bet my life on anyone else. These are good people, better than me. They just need a reason to believe they can make a difference. Eva studied her for a long moment before nodding. Okay, do it, but be careful. We can't afford to lose you too. Over the next several hours, the team worked tireless. Samuel and Sarah pored over the map, identifying key weak points in the tunnel system and crafting a multi-pronged strategy. Eva made calls to secure additional supplies, ensuring they'd have the tools needed for a covert assault. Clara, despite her injuries, managed to contact 3 trusted officers, Ramirez, Carter, and Anderson. Each of them had grown disillusioned with the sheriff's corruption, but had been too afraid to act alone. Clara's call reignited a spark in them, and by nightfall, they had pledged their support. The plan came together piece by piece. Samuel's military expertise proved invaluable, his years of experience in high-pressure situations lending the operation a sense of precision and discipline. He demonstrated breach techniques and counter-ambush maneuvers, walking Eva through every possible contingency. Sarah, on the other hand, worked to rally the community in quieter ways. She spoke to trusted locals, spreading whispers that gave the Crimson Vultures false leads and confusing their network. Every misdirection she planted was another small victory, another crack in the cartel's armor. By midnight, the garage had transformed into a makeshift war room. Maps, blueprints, and hastily scribbled notes covered every available surface. The air was thick with tension, but there was also a sense of purpose, a shared determination that bound the group together. Eva stood at the center of it all, her arms crossed as she addressed the team. This is it. We strike at dawn. Samuel and I will lead the charge through the tunnels. Clara, you'll coordinate the officers and handle ground support. Sarah, you stay here and keep the locals moving. Keep the distractions coming. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the group. This won't be easy. We've already seen what they're capable of. But if we work together, if we stick to the plan, we can take them down, and we can bring Miguel home. A murmur of agreement passed through the room, the gravity of the moment settling over them. Samuel stepped forward, placing a hand on Eva's shoulder. We'll get him back, he said firmly, and we'll make sure they never hurt anyone else again. Eva nodded, her resolve hardening. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was her determination. This wasn't just about Miguel anymore. It was about justice for everyone the Crimson Vultures had taken, for everyone who had suffered under their reign. The fight wasn't over, but they were ready. The convoy of black SUVs rolled into Red Canyon under the cover of night, their engines a low growl that reverberated through the empty streets. The headlights cut through the darkness like predatory eyes, their glow briefly illuminating the weathered storefronts and cracked pavement. Victor Kane sat in the back seat of the lead vehicle, his sharp eyes scanning the town as they approached their destination. Even in the dim light, Kane's presence was commanding. His tailored suit, an anomaly in the rugged desert setting, clung to his frame with military precision. His angular face bore the same calculating expression that had haunted Eva's memories for years. To most, he might have appeared like a corporate executive or a diplomat, but those who knew him understood the lethal intelligence behind his calm exterior. The convoy came to a halt near one of the Crimson Vulture's main warehouses, and Kane stepped out with deliberate ease, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. Around him, gang members stiffened, their postures straightening as though his very presence demanded discipline. Anton Grikov hurried forward to greet him, his usual bravado tempered by the weight of Kane's reputation. "Mr. Kane," Anton said, his voice tinged with nervous respect. "We weren't expecting you so soon." Kane glanced at him, his gaze cold and unyielding. "I wasn't expecting to have to come here at all, Mr. Grikov. Yet, here I am. And do you know why?" Anton swallowed hard, his usual smirk faltering. "There was a situation," he admitted, his words hesitant. "One of our shipments was intercepted. And I know," Kane interrupted, his tone sharp but measured, "and that situation has drawn attention we cannot afford. The syndicate expects results, not excuses." He strode toward the warehouse, his movements smooth and calculated, while Anton scrambled to keep up. Inside, the dim lighting revealed rows of shipping containers, each marked with nondescript codes. The faint hum of generators filled the air, accompanied by the distant muffled sounds of crying. Kane's expression didn't change as he surveyed the operation, but his eyes missed nothing. "We're relocating the assets immediately," Kane ordered, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "The tunnels will provide cover until the convoy is ready to move. Double the guards at every checkpoint, and ensure there are no mistakes this time." Anton nodded quickly. "Understood, Mr. Kane. I'll personally oversee the—" "No," Kane cut him off, his icy tone making Anton flinch. "You've already demonstrated your inability to handle this. I'll be taking charge from here." The gang members exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared to question him. Kane's reputation preceded him, a man who combined military discipline with ruthless efficiency. He wasn't just a leader, he was an enforcer, a strategist, who left no room for error. Outside the warehouse, Eva watched from the shadows, her heart pounding as she caught sight of him. Victor Kane, the man who had destroyed her team in Guatemala, whose cold, calculated actions had left her haunted by loss and guilt. Seeing him now, standing in the middle of Red Canyon like a predator surveying his territory, reignited every wound she had tried to bury. She gripped the binoculars tighter, her knuckles widening as she observed him issuing orders. "Eva," Samuel's voice crackled softly through the comms, pulling her back to the present. "What do you see?" "It's him," she whispered, her voice taut with emotion. "Victor Kane. He's here." There was a pause on the other end. Samuel knew the significance of that name, the weight it carried for Eva. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said, her eyes never leaving Kane. "And he's not wasting time. They're moving the victims tonight." "Then we don't have much time either," Samuel replied. "We'll stick to the plan, but we need to move faster." Eva nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Keep everyone ready. This just got a lot more complicated." Inside the warehouse, Kane moved methodically, inspecting the preparation.
With an air of quiet menace, he paused near one of the containers, his gaze lingering on the frightened faces of the victims inside. To him, they were not people but commodities, assets in a ledger, numbers in a grander scheme. He didn't see their tears or hear their muffled sobs. He only saw the cost of failure. "Ensure they're sedated before transport," he ordered. Turning to one of the gang members, "We can't afford any disruptions." "Yes, sir," the man stammered, rushing to carry out the command. Kane's attention shifted to the tunnel entrance at the far end of the warehouse, where a team of armed guards stood watch. He walked over, his polished shoes echoing against the concrete floor, and surveyed the passage with a critical eye. "These tunnels are your lifeline," he said, addressing the guards. "Lose control of them, and this entire operation collapses. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. Kane," one of the guards replied, his voice tight with fear. "Good," Kane said, his tone soft but laced with an undercurrent of threat. "Because if you fail, the consequences will be unpleasant." Eva retreated into the darkness, her mind racing. Kane's presence was a game changer. He would tighten security, anticipate their moves, and eliminate any weaknesses in the operation. But she couldn't let that stop her. If anything, his arrival only made her more determined. She crouched behind an abandoned stack of crates, taking a steadying breath. This wasn't just about strategy or tactics anymore. It was personal. Kane represented everything she had fought against, everything she had lost. And now, she had a chance to face him, to bring him down. But first, she needed her team. She tapped her comms. "Samuel, Clara, Sarah, we need to adjust the plan. Meet me at the fallback point. It's time to end this." As Eva disappeared into the night, Kane continued his work, unaware that the woman he had left for dead in Guatemala was watching. The tunnels were silent except for the soft, calculated steps of Eva and her team as they advanced through the narrow passageway. The air was thick with damp earth and the faint metallic tang of rust. Miguel's map was their guide, marking the routes through the maze-like tunnel system. Every step brought them closer to the central warehouse, a critical hub for the Crimson Vulture's operation. Eva moved at the front, her senses heightened, her weapon held steady. Behind her, Samuel followed with his rifle at the ready, his years of combat experience evident in every movement. Clara's voice crackled softly over the comms, her tone calm but urgent. "We're in position," she reported. "Ramirez and Carter have set the first roadblock. Traffic's already starting to back up. Kane's men will take the bait." "Good," Eva replied. "Stick to the plan. Keep them distracted." On the surface, Clara and the loyal officers executed their part of the operation. Roadblocks appeared suddenly on the main routes, creating chaos and drawing the attention of Kane's lieutenants. Fires erupted in strategically chosen locations, billowing smoke that obscured visibility and added to the confusion. Townsfolk, tipped off by Sarah, stayed safely indoors, leaving the streets empty except for the police and the Crimson Vultures scrambling to regain control. Eva smirked slightly as Clara's update came through. "Looks like Kane took the bait. They're pulling men from the warehouse to deal with the diversions." "Perfect," Samuel muttered. "That's fewer guns waiting for us inside." The team reached the final junction before the warehouse, pausing to regroup. Eva pulled out a small device from her pack, a motion sensor that Miguel had rigged to detect movement on the other side of the wall. She placed it against the stone, watching as the display lit up with red dots. Guards patrolling the area just beyond the entrance. "There are 5 of them," she whispered. 2 stationary, 3 on a rotating patrol. "We'll take them quietly." Samuel nodded, already reaching for his knife. "Leave the stationary ones to me." Eva signaled for the team to split up, each taking a designated target. As one of the patrolling guards rounded the corner, Eva struck, her movements swift and precise. She wrapped an arm around his neck, muffling his shout as she brought him to the ground. A quick blow to the temple rendered him unconscious. Across the room, Samuel dispatched his target with equal efficiency, his blade flashing in the dim light. Within minutes, the guards were neutralized, their bodies dragged into the shadows. The team regrouped, their breathing steady despite the tension in the air. Inside the warehouse, the Crimson Vultures were already on edge. The diversions above ground had thrown their operations into disarray, and the remaining guards were frantically trying to maintain order. Trucks sat idling near the loading docks, their drivers shouting over the chaos as they awaited instructions. The air buzzed with confusion, and no one noticed as Eva and her team slipped in through the tunnel entrance. Miguel's map had marked the layout of the warehouse, and Eva moved with purpose, leading the team toward the storage area where trafficked victims were being held. Along the way, they placed small charges on critical infrastructure points, fuel tanks, electrical panels, and structural support. Each one was rigged to detonate on a timed sequence, designed to create maximum chaos. Samuel stopped near a stack of crates, his eyes scanning the room. "We need to find Miguel," he said, his voice low. "We will," Eva assured him. "But first, we secure the victims. They're the priority." They moved toward the storage area, pausing just outside the heavy steel doors. Eva signaled for Samuel to cover her as she picked the lock, her hands steady despite the urgency. The door creaked open, revealing a group of frightened captives huddled together in the dim light. Their eyes widened as they saw Eva, their expressions a mixture of fear and hope. "We're here to help," Eva said softly, lowering her weapon to show she meant no harm. "We're getting you out." Samuel and Eva worked quickly, cutting the captives' bindings and guiding them toward the tunnel entrance. Clara's voice came through the comms again. "We've got more movement topside. Reinforcements are heading your way." "How much time do we have?" Eva asked. "Not much. Maybe 10 minutes, Clara replied. Eva nodded grimly. "We'll be out before then. Keep them busy." As the last of the captives disappeared into the tunnel, Eva turned her attention back to the warehouse. The diversions above had done their job, but the Crimson Vultures were regrouping, their shouts and the clatter of weapons growing louder. "We need to move fast," Eva said. "Samuel, let's find Miguel." The two of them navigated deeper into the warehouse,
their footsteps silent as they moved between rows of crates and machinery. They found him in a small office near the back, slumped in a chair, his hands bound and his face bruised. Two guards stood nearby, their attention focused on the chaos outside. Eva motioned to Samuel, who nodded. In one fluid motion, they struck, Eva taking down the first guard while Samuel neutralized the second. Miguel looked up, his expression dazed but relieved. "You're late," he muttered as Eva cut his bindings. "Traffic," she replied with a faint smirk. "Let's go." By the time they reached the tunnel entrance, the warehouse was in shambles. The charges Eva had placed earlier detonated in rapid succession, each explosion sending shockwaves through the building. Flames erupted from the fuel tanks, and the lights flickered before plunging the warehouse into darkness. Outside, Clara's diversions continued to spread chaos. Kane's forces were overwhelmed, their communications disrupted, and the Crimson Vulture's chain of command was crumbling. The cartel's once siren grip on Red Canyon was slipping, and they didn't even realize the extent of the damage yet. As the team disappeared into the tunnels, Eva allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The surprise attack had worked. They had struck a blow against the Crimson Vultures, rescued the captives, and reclaimed Miguel. But she knew this was only the beginning. Victor Kane was still out there, and the fight for Red Canyon was far from over. The air in the underground chamber known as the Cathedral was stifling, heavy with the dampness of the tunnels and the acrid tang of disturbed earth. The cavernous space was dimly lit by industrial lights strung haphazardly along the walls, casting long menacing shadows that seemed to flicker and move with a life of their own. The echoes of Eva's steady footsteps reverberated off the stone walls, each step bringing her closer to the man who had haunted her for years. Victor Kane stood at the far end of the chamber, his back to her as he observed the flurry of activity among his men. The Crimson Vultures were scrambling, hastily loading the last of their containers into waiting vehicles, their movements frenetic and disorganized. But Kane was calm, his composed demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around him. He exuded the quiet confidence of a predator who believed he was untouchable. "Victor Kane," Eva called out, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. It was steady, cold, and laced with years of pent-up rage. Kane turned slowly, his sharp features illuminated by the flickering light. He regarded her with a faint smirk, as if amused by her presence. "Eva Lawson," he said smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "You've been expecting me?" she asked, advancing further into the chamber, her weapon trained on him. "Of course," he replied, clasping his hands behind his back. "You've been a thorn in my side since Guatemala. I knew it was only a matter of time before you'd come looking for me." Eva stopped a few paces away, her grip on her gun tightening. "This ends here, Kane. No more running, no more hiding." Kane chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "Running? Hiding? Oh, Eva, I don't run from people like you. I've been waiting for this." The exchange barely lasted a moment before Kane lunged forward, pulling a knife from his belt with practiced precision. Eva sidestepped his strike, her training taking over as she countered with a sharp kick to his ribs. He stumbled but recovered quickly, slashing at her with deadly precision. The knife's blade gleamed in the dim light, each swipe coming closer to its mark. Eva ducked under another strike, her heart pounding in her ears. This wasn't just another fight. This was personal. The man in front of her wasn't just a criminal. He was the one who had destroyed her team, her family, and left her with the scars she carried both inside and out. "You've gotten better," Kane said, his voice calm even as their blades clashed. "I remember you being sloppier in Guatemala. Hesitant. Weak." Eva's jaw tightened. "And I remember you being a coward, killing my team in the dark, running before you could face the consequences." Kane's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. He pressed forward, his strikes more aggressive. But Eva held her ground. She matched his every move, her training honed to perfection by years of combat. The fight moved through the chamber, their movements fluid and calculated. Eva used her smaller frame to her advantage, weaving around Kane's larger, more powerful strikes. She landed a hard elbow to his jaw, sending him stumbling back, but he quickly retaliated with a sharp kick that caught her in the side, knocking the wind out of her. Gasping for breath, Eva rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a downward strike from Kane's knife. The blade embedded itself into the ground, and she took the opportunity to sweep his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, but before she could press her advantage, he rolled away and rose to his feet,
his knife ready once more. You can't win this, Eva, Kane taunted, though his breathing was labored. You should know by now I don't lose. Neither do I, Eva shot back, her voice resolute. The fight escalated, the sound of their struggle echoing through the vast chamber. Kane's men, sensing the danger, hesitated at the edges of the room, unsure whether to intervene. The few who tried to step forward were quickly taken down by Samuel and Clara, who had entered the fray to secure the perimeter. Kane swung again, but this time, Eva was ready. She disarmed him with a sharp twist of his wrist, sending the knife skittering across the ground. Without hesitation, she launched a flurry of blows, driving him back against one of the chamber's support columns. Kane grunted as he hit the stone, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Eva grabbed the front of his shirt, slamming him against the column once more. Her face was inches from his, her voice low and fierce. "This is for my team," she said, her fists clenched. "For every life you've destroyed." For a moment Kane's mask of calm cracked. His smirk was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. "Go ahead," he spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Do it. Kill me." Eva hesitated, her mind flashing back to Guatemala, to the faces of her fallen teammates. She tightened her grip on him, her knuckles white, but then she let him go, letting him collapse to the ground. "No," she said, her voice steady. "You don't get the easy way out. You're going to face justice. You're going to answer for everything." As the sounds of the Crimson Vulture's collapse filled the chamber, Eva bound Kane's hands with a zip tie, securing him for extraction. She pulled a radio from her belt, signaling to Clara and Samuel. "Target secured. Operation complete." Samuel's voice came through, steady and calm. "We've got the rest of the men rounded up. The victims are safe. It's over, Eva." She looked down at Kane, who glared up at her with cold fury. "Not yet," she muttered. "Not until he's locked away for good." The team regrouped as federal agents descended into the tunnels, their arrival marking the end of the Crimson Vulture's reign in Red Canyon. Eva handed Kane over, watching as he was led away in chains. Her hands shook slightly, the adrenaline finally wearing off, but her resolve remained firm. This was the closure she had sought for years, the confrontation she had dreamed of since Guatemala. But as she looked around at her team, at the survivors they had saved, she realized it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about protecting those who couldn't fight for themselves. The dawn broke over Red Canyon, casting golden light across the desert landscape. Smoke still lingered in the air from the previous night's explosions, but the town was quiet now, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded just hours earlier. In the center of the square, Victor Kane was marched out in handcuffs, flanked by federal agents in tactical gear. His once immaculate suit was torn, dust-streaked, and bloodied, but his expression remained calm, almost arrogant. Eva stood nearby, watching as Kane was escorted toward the waiting convoy of black SUVs. The quiet hum of engines filled the air as the agents prepared to transport him to a secure federal facility, where he would face trial for his myriad crimes. "You've made a lot of enemies, Kane," Eva said, stepping closer. Her voice was steady but carried an edge of finality. "This is the end of the line for you." Kane turned his head slightly, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Do you really think this changes anything, Lawson? Cut off one head, and another will take its place." Eva's gaze didn't waver. "Maybe, but you won't be there to see it." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You think a trial will matter? You think the system will hold someone like me? There's always someone willing to look the other way. Always someone to grease the wheels." "Not this time," Eva replied, her tone cold. "I've made sure of every piece of evidence we've gathered, every victim you've hurt. They'll be the ones testifying. And this time, there's nowhere to hide." As the agents secured Kane into the armored SUV, Samuel walked up beside Eva, his hands resting on his hips. "Think he's right, that someone will find a way to cut him loose?" "Maybe," Eva admitted, her gaze still locked on Kane. "But it doesn't matter. He's not walking away from this unscathed. Even if he finds a way to squirm out of it, his empire is in ruins, his network exposed. He'll never rebuild what we destroyed here." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "And the town? It's starting to heal," Eva said, her voice softer. She glanced toward the crowd of townsfolk who had cautiously gathered to watch Kane's departure. Their faces showed a mix of relief and weariness, a people who had endured too much, but were beginning to see a glimmer of hope. Clara approached, her arm still in a sling from her injury, but her posture strong. "The feds are locking him up tight," she said. "They're taking the evidence we handed over, and it's solid, enough to put him away for good." "Good," Eva replied,
Let's make sure it sticks. Clara hesitated, then asked, "What's next for you, Eva? This isn't over, is it?" Eva sighed, the weight of the fight still heavy on her shoulders. "No, it's not. Kane was just one piece of the puzzle. The Argento Syndicate is bigger than him, and they'll keep trying to rebuild, but we've shown them that they're not untouchable. And I'm not stopping until every last one of them is gone." As the convoy of federal vehicles pulled away, the dust kicked up by their tires began to settle. Eva stood in the quiet square, watching until they disappeared into the horizon. She took a deep breath, the weight of victory mingling with the knowledge that the war was far from over. Red Canyon was free, for now, but Eva Lawson knew her fight wasn't just for one town. It was for every place still under the grip of cartels like the Argento Syndicate. Turning to her team, she gave a small nod. "Let's regroup. There's work to do." The weeks after the Crimson Vulture's downfall brought a renewed sense of purpose to Red Canyon. The air, once thick with tension and fear, now carried a cautious optimism. The town, scarred but resilient, began to reclaim its independence, driven by the determination of its people and the leadership of those who had stood against the darkness. Sarah Alvarez took it upon herself to rally the community. Her diner became the heart of Red Canyon, a place where townsfolk could gather, share stories, and rebuild trust that had been eroded by years of cartel influence. Over cups of strong coffee and slices of her famous apple pie, Sarah listened to their fears, their hopes, and their plans for the future. "We've survived worse," she would say, her voice steady and warm, "and we'll survive this too, together." Her words resonated, igniting a spark of unity among the residents. People who had once kept their heads down began stepping forward, offering their skills to rebuild the town. Farmers repaired fences, mechanics fixed abandoned vehicles, and shopkeepers reopened their businesses. The once empty streets of Red Canyon slowly came back to life. Samuel Reed, the quiet and steady presence at the garage, became a symbol of resilience. His military past, once a source of personal guilt, now became an inspiration for the town. Samuel organized efforts to repair damaged infrastructure, using his logistical expertise to coordinate supply lines and manpower. "You don't need to be a soldier to fight for your home," he told the volunteers who gathered at the garage. "You just need to care enough to stand up." Samuel's calm demeanor and willingness to lead by example earned him the respect of the community. Under his guidance, Red Canyon's once crumbling buildings were fortified, its roads cleared, and its spirit mended. Clara Vega, recovering from her injuries, found herself thrust into an unexpected but welcome role. At a town meeting in Sarah's diner, the townsfolk unanimously nominated her as the new sheriff. Her bravery and integrity during the fight against the Crimson Vultures had shown Red Canyon what justice could look like. Clara stood at the front of the diner, her arms still in a sling, as the room erupted in applause. She hesitated, her voice catching in her throat. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, looking to Eva for reassurance. Eva gave her a firm nod. "You're more than ready. This town needs someone who believes in justice, someone who's willing to fight for it." With renewed confidence, Clara accepted the bat. Her first act as sheriff was to swear in a small team of deputies, choosing those who had proven their loyalty during the battle. Together, they began the task of restoring law and order to Red Canyon, ensuring that the town would never again fall under the shadow of corruption. Eva watched the transformation from a distance, knowing her part in the town's story was coming to an end. Red Canyon was healing, its people taking back what had been stolen from them. As Sarah, Samuel, and Clara led the way, Eva felt a quiet pride in what they had accomplished. The battle for Red Canyon was over, but its spirit had endured. And while Eva's journey would take her far from the desert town, she knew she would always carry a piece of it with her, a reminder of what people could achieve when they stood together against the darkness. The sun was just beginning to rise over the rugged peaks of Red Canyon, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson. Eva stood at the edge of town, her gear packed into the back of her battered car. The air was cool and quiet, the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm. Behind her, the town was stirring to life, its people moving forward from the chaos that had gripped them for so long. Eva turned to see Samuel, Sarah, and Clara walking toward her, their expressions a mixture of pride and sadness. "You sure about this?" Samuel asked, his tone low and steady. "Red Canyon's just starting to find its footing. Could use someone like you around." Eva smiled faintly. "You've got this covered, Samuel. The town doesn't need me anymore. It needs you, Sarah, Clara, and everyone else willing to fight for it. You've proven you can handle it." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've done more for this town than we can ever repay, Eva. But if you ever need a place to rest, you know where to find us." Clara, now wearing the sheriff's badge, nodded. "You're leaving us stronger than you found us. And if trouble ever comes knocking again, You'll be the first person we call. Eva chuckled softly, the sound tinged with warmth. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But if it does, you know I'll be here. She looked out at the desert stretching endlessly before her, the horizon shimmering in the early morning light. Her thoughts drifted to the faces of those they had rescued, the lives they had saved, and the promises she had made. To her team, to the victims, to herself. The fight wasn't over. Victor Kane may have been captured, and the Crimson Vultures dismantled, but the Argento Syndicate still loomed large. Their network stretched far beyond Red Canyon, a hydra with many heads that needed to be severed. Eva took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her next steps settle over her. She wasn't walking away from the town to rest. She was leaving to take the fight to the Syndicate's heart. Every piece of evidence she and her team had gathered would guide her to the next target, the next battle in a war that demanded everything she had to give. As she climbed into the driver's seat, Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. Take care of yourself out there, Lawson. The world needs people like you. I'll do my best, she replied, her voice steady. With one last look at her friends, Eva started the engine. The car rumbled to life, its tires kicking up dust as it rolled onto the open road. She glanced in the rearview mirror, watching Red Canyon fade into the distance, a small but indomitable town she had helped set free. Ahead of her lay endless miles of road, leading to places she had never been, battles she had yet to fight. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, illuminating the path before her, Eva felt a sense of clarity. Her journey wasn't just about dismantling the Argento Syndicate. It was about fighting for justice, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And she wouldn't stop until the darkness that plagued towns like Red Canyon was extinguished for good. What did you think of Eva's relentless fight for justice in Red Canyon? Do you think she will continue to hunt down and eliminate the remaining roots of the Argento Syndicate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If Eva's story inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button, share this journey with your friends, and subscribe to stay updated. Thank you. The gang thought it was over, but Kale didn't step back. She stepped in, and every move wrote its own warning. The gang thought it was over, but Kale didn't step back. She stepped in, and every move wrote its own warning. Kale Bishop didn't blink. Her silence wasn't hesitation. It was precision sharpening itself. Kale Bishop didn't blink. Her silence wasn't hesitation. It was precision sharpening itself. Deputy Thorne leaned in. She doesn't threaten, she warns, quietly. The gang thought it was over, but Kale didn't step back. She stepped in, and every move wrote its own warning. Deputy Thorne leaned in. She doesn't threaten, she warns, quietly. Dr. Renner reviewed the X-ray. No one walks away from what she survived, unless they're trained to disappear.